After witnessing the apex predator allow him to approach its young, the auraless jungle throbbed with the hope that the alien girl might eventually trust humans. Life as the rescue pod of Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blackwood smashed through the thick canopy, breaking trees, and before slamming into the soft dirt under the pod, metal shrieked as it ripped away through the alien plants. He was momentarily stunned as the impact knocked the wind out of his lungs and the emergency systems hissed and stuttered. Ryan growled, unbuckling, Godam Fleet Command in their routine patrols around him. The metal plating on his tough brown battlesuit, which he wore from the harness, was dented, but intact. The green, breathable atmosphere flashed on the environmental readout of the suit. Acceptable gravity and no short-term poisoning. Ryan assembled his survival gear, and he kicked open the damaged hatch and stepped off his boots as the humid air rushed in, bearing a sense of rich soil and exotic plants. The forest, a riot of violet-hued trees and emerald vines, rose above him, sinking slightly into the loamy earth, extending in the direction of an amber-streaked sky. Mayday, Mayday, this is the US horizon. My pod's Lieutenant Commander Blackwood has made a crash landing on somewhere with unknown coordinates. He tapped his communicator once more, but all he got was static. Ryan was unaware of this, but his sharp eyes observed everything he did while seated in the Nair, looked at the weird creature that had descended from the sky from the branches above. Her orange skin encrusted with dark symbols that resembled her people's holy designs, mingled with the colorful. Her silver-white hair fell down her back as the light from the canopy filtered through, in contrast to the sparse bright orange garments that shielded only the most vital components of her sports. As she examined the invader, Formnir's eyes narrowed because his shape resembled hers, but distinct, with wider shoulders, darker skin, and odd coverings over the majority of. She had been told that foreigners only caused Alis to be destroyed because of his body, yet something about this one piqued her interest. Unaware of his observer, Ryan cleared a small area and put up a camp makeshift shelter, and started recording the local vegetation. His movements were effective, and he demonstrated how a guy should behave. He was prepared to live on this world, whatever the hell it is, from day one. There is no contact with the horizon. Emergency beacon activated in his personal record. But who does anyone know if the local atmosphere is welcoming enough? Indication of sentient life yet. But I'm not alone in this place. Someone is keeping an eye on me. Ryan started a little fire as night fell, and the flames created dancing shadows all around. He took off the outer armor of his face, showcasing its powerful features and the stubble that was starting to grow on his jaw. Neri drew nearer as the suit revealed a shape hardened by military training and survival in hostile settings. She had never witnessed fire used in this manner to intentionally control her until she witnessed the weird creature's activities. People feared and shunned it, yet this outsider suddenly controlled it with ease. Both of them were startled by a stir in the brush, and Ryan grabbed his utility knife, the only weapon he had. Managed to salvation, Neri stiffened upon hearing the sound of a young, fierce one of the most deadly predators in the forest. The animal produced a cub that was scarcely bigger than, compared like an earthwolf, but with 4 strong legs and blue fur that shines with black. Its golden-tipped fur caught the firelight, and its eyes and stripes shone yellow-orange. Growling, perplexed and terrified by the flames, Ryan murmured, "Easy there, little one." Neri watched in shock as the human made no attempt to engage in combat, lowering his knife gently and saying, "I'm not looking for trouble. Strike or run away from the fierce creatures that her people, the top predators, feared." In Oralis's jungles, even a young animal might rip a warrior to pieces, and the cubs hissed as they retreated from the flames. But Ryan, intrigued by the weird creature, stayed motionless while speaking in a calming, low voice. To Nair's surprise, the cub's hostility progressively decreased as it observed. "That's right," Ryan added softly, although she was exhausted. Her people would have been spared the desire to kill. "We can share this area, can't we?" He reached into his pack and took out a ration bar, broke off a piece, and threw it. Gently approaching the cub, who warily smelled it before eating it, the Near's pulse raced. No stranger should be able to. The stories of her people must be false, or this person must have some strength, because she approached a fierce animal without getting attacked. She didn't comprehend, and as the night grew darker, Ryan finally went to his refuge, while the fierce cub seemed content that the visitor did not pose an imminent threat, and she withdrew to the edge of the jungle. Hiding spot, her perspective changing beneath her, and tomorrow she would pay more attention to this peculiar guy, for his Ryan fell into a restless slumber, the sounds of the foreign jungle producing He was surrounded by an unearthly lullaby, and his final thought before passing out was that, whichever planet he had arrived on, he was just getting a peek of the secrets it held when dawn broke over Aurelis, illuminating the jungle with amber hues. Gold, Ryan came out of his shelter, his muscles tense from the strange gravity, and he stretched, looking around him. With new eyes, the scene of the crash appeared less hectic during the day. On day 2, he recorded a voice that was still poor, but the twisted metal of the pod acted as a vivid reminder of his situation. Sleeping still without communication with the horizon, I'm going to explore the area today in search of I've never seen anything like that. So I'm curious to view the fresh water and evaluate the local wildlife that cub from last night. Her mind was racing with questions about the odd human she had drawn closer to during the night, and she had hardly slept. The foreigner appeared less menacing in the morning light as he sat in a tree that overlooked his camp. Ryan filled a foldable container while being meticulous in his motions as he arranged his supplies and examined his equipment, filled a jug with water from his emergency supplies before heading out to investigate. Followed quietly as they moved through the canopy with the familiar ease with which her people had adapted to deal with the dense people in the Aurelian forests, moved surprisingly stealthily since their physique were ideally suited to the environment. He appeared to be an outsider who periodically stopped to gather plant samples or look at footprints in the soft ground. Sincere desire to comprehend the forest instead of conquering it, which is in opposition to Neri's. After being instructed, Midday discovered Ryan crouching on the edge of a tiny clearing, looking at new footprints that Neri. Her breath caught as she saw that it was an adult pharaoh right away. The human was in grave danger once the mother had returned for her child, as if a huge figure had been called forth by her thoughts. The adult Ferocian, who was almost as tall as the human at the shoulder, sprang from the brush across from Ryan. Its yellow-orange eyes and golden-tipped hair created a mane around its neck, while its blue fur rippled over strong muscles. "Holy shit," Ryan said, his breath rising slowly as the hungry stare latched on him. His hand was hovering close to his utility knife at full height, but he did not draw it. "You must be Mama Bear," because of the fierce snarl that reverberated throughout. 3 cubs, including the one from the night before, emerged in the clearing behind her. The family unit moved. The mother positioned herself between her young and the possible threat in a difficult situation with coordinated precision. An encounter with a ferocious animal guarding its young would tear a human apart, and no one survived. In seconds, and she didn't want to see such bloodshed. But Ryan did something out of the blue and knelt down slowly. "No harm to you or your little one," he said, laying his hands palms up on his thighs. "Ones," he murmured, "just passing through." The fierce creature came closer. Ryan stayed completely motionless, his breathing even and controlled, his nostrils flaring warily as it smelt the air. Neri gazed in shock as the predator circled him, sniffing at his clothes or the cub's equipment, appeared to recognize Ryan from the night before, approaching him as its mother circled and sniffed at his boot. The cub sniffed it when Ryan very gently stretched his hand palm down. "That's right," Ryan whispered. "Haven't we met before?" The mother Ferocious came back to observe this exchange with obvious interest, and Ryan slowly moved into position when she didn't attack. Reaching into, he took another ration bar out of his pocket, broke off a piece, and offered it to the cub, who almost fell off her perch. When her young were approached, Mother Ferocious should have struck right away, but instead, she saw her head tilt. As Ryan remarked, "Your little one has good taste," when her cub accepted the food. Level though I am unable to say anything about these rations, his voice remained calm and level. I was so angry that the mother sat on her hunches and let her other Ryan was patient as the cubs approached the human, giving them tiny morsels of food and soft words. The scenario was amazing. Neri could hardly believe her eyes after seeing them, in contrast to what she knew about both fierce and foreigners. After what felt like a lifetime, the fierce mother let out a rumbling sound deep in her throat, and the cubs came back right away. She turned and led her family back into the deep forest after giving Ryan one last approving glance. "Well," remarked Jungle Ryan, his shoulders drooping a little as he let out a slow exhale. "That could have gone a lot worse." Neri stayed still. Her perspective is being shattered by the fierce, most feared creature. In addition to sparing the human, Alis had permitted him to be close to her while she was little. Despite the fact that it was unprecedentedly impossible she had personally witnessed it. Unaware of how fortunate he was to have survived, Ryan carried on exploring and gathered water from a little, using tools from his pack. He stream tested it before starting to return to Camp Nerody and pursuing her interest, surpassing her prudence. This person was not like any stranger from the tales he didn't try to subjugate or destroy the jungle since he appreciated it and its people. And somehow, as dusk drew near, Ryan returned because Aurelis's top predator had deemed him trustworthy to his camp and started cooking using his provisions and fruits he had determined were safe to eat. Approach more closely than before, driven by an overwhelming desire to comprehend this inconsistency with everything she had been. When a twig broke under her foot, Ryan halted and turned slowly in the direction of He called softly, "I know you're there. You've been following me all day. Perhaps it's time for us to meet in person." Nair's heart pounded in her chest at the moment. Choice had come sooner than she had anticipated, but her anxiety had been heightened by what she had seen today. After taking a deep breath, she was replaced by something else, a burning curiosity that needed satisfaction. "You're not what I expected," Neri remarked, as she emerged from the shadows and entered the ring of light created by Ryan's little fire. Despite the fatigue in her tone, her voice was musical as she stood at the edge of the firelight, ready to either fly or fight. Ryan blinked, taken aback not only by her look, but also by the reality that she spoke his native dialect, English, which we refer to as the trade tongue many. When strangers use it, her silver-white hair catches the firelight, giving her orange-skinned face a halo look. The dark lines on her skin appeared to change as she moved, creating an eye-catching optical illusion. Why did the Ryan pointed to the area across the flames and said, "Ferocious not kill you. Would you like? I have food to share, so I'll sit down." Nier hesitated, then lowered. She lowered herself to the ground while keeping a cautious distance. "And you honestly didn't respond to my query?" "I don't know," Ryan offered her some of the food he had made. "I've had predators on other worlds before, and they typically." Nier's eyes expanded as he responded to calm energy and respected other planets. She took a cautious sniff of the food as she received it, then took a tiny bite. "You travel between stars. We investigate and build trade channels as part of the United Earth Fleet." He grinned adorably. "But I doubt that crashing on your planet qualifies as occasional assistance with diplomatic missions. A diplomatic victory, but your ship was damaged in an asteroid field and destroyed. When the systems failed, he was in a survey pod. The horizon is most likely still searching for me." He studied her with, "You've been observing me ever since I landed, haven't you?" Naraya nodded to her. "My people think that strangers only bring harm, so I was given the task of watching you assess the threat, and based on your findings, I'm not sure if she met his look straight at the fierce, who are revered by my people as the top hunters. No one approached their young and limp, but you were feared and respected by Airlays." "This has never happened before, Ryan," she said hazily. "The mother accepted you. Taking this into account, in my culture, We say that deeds speak louder than words. It's possible that she evaluated me based on my actions rather than my personality. Kept in mind that my people, known as the Aurelians, have coexisted peacefully with the jungle for a very long time. For generations, we have witnessed foreigners arrive, take, destroy, and depart. Ryan added softly that not all people are the same, and I imagine that not all Aurelians are either. This earned him a, "It's true that a tiny smile may turn Ner's face, from simply lovely to gorgeous," regarded as unconventional by my people, because they are overly interested in the outside world. During the course of their cautious information exchange over the meal, Ryan discovered that Neri was She discovered that he was a scout and survival expert who was assigned to monitor the borders of Aurelian land. "Your coverings," Neri remarked, pointing to his battle armor, "are your coverings, specialist. You're trained to navigate unknown environments. They are not like anything my people make. It's a battlefield. Suit provides defense against environmental dangers. Simple weaponry, nothing special," he said, tapping the breastplate. "You don't have any weapons, but the metal inserts have saved my life multiple times. I lost my sidearm in the collision." He showed her his utility knife, which is more of a tool than a weapon. Weapon, and she appeared to approve of this as her posture relaxed even further. Ryan smiled and said, "People think that those who come, armed for war, will find it another thing we have in common." Neri described the intricate Aurelius ecosystem as the night became darker and their discussion became more fluid. Ryan told tales of other worlds he had been to. Despite their disparate backgrounds, they discovered a connection in their Ryan praised the Ferocians' reverence for nature and their positions as observers rather than conquerors. "You finally said that they are revered by your people," and I nodded. "They are. My ancestors had a long-standing agreement with the guardians of the deep jungle. They do not hunt us, and we do not hunt them. We have dignified, independent lives. But no one approaches a Ferocian, and you don't engage with them directly." Intentionally, she would look up the phrase "suicidal," and Ryan would laugh quietly before "Hi, suppose I was fortunate. But it wasn't luck," Neri said gravely. "I've been thinking regarding what I saw. The Mother Pharaoh circled and smelled to test you. She observed, assessed your motives, and evidently located me. It's more than okay that she let you get close to her Neri-leaned cubs." Forward her tight expression. "Do you realize how important this is in? There is no record of such an incident in any of our history. Therefore, Ryan thought that perhaps your records need to be updated, or perhaps you're not who you seem to be," that her tone was one of sincere curiosity rather than reproach. "What you?" Ryan shrugged and said, "See is what you get. Just a human trying to survive." Their chat was cut off by a distant roar that was clearly a Ferocian, till my spacecraft discovered me. But Neri's body became rigid as she heard a tone of concern. That caused her to sit up straight. She remarked, "There's a call of pain," Ryan, getting to her feet. "Existed as well. I'm not sure if it was the same family from now, but it originated from." She indicated a path into the shadows, which I need to explore. "I'll be there." "With you," Neridi appeared shocked. "If it's that fierce, why would you put yourself in danger?" He shrugged. "But perhaps I could be of use. 2 pairs of eyes are better than." After examining him for a while, she nodded and said, "We'll go together, but you. The jungle at night is not forgiving of errors, so you have to follow my example." Recognized, they ventured into the shadows with the assurance of someone accustomed to the surroundings. Ryan at night, the jungle was closely followed by converted bioluminescent plants that gave off an unsettling blue glow. Journey as strange noises reverberated in every direction. Ryan observed that when Ner touched some plants, they would glow brightly in response, illuminating their path. The distress calls increased after a brief exchange that revealed a profound understanding and connection to the surroundings. As they got closer to a tiny clearing, Neri raised a hand to tell Ryan to stop, and they huddled at the edge. Peeping into the open area from the foliage, the female, fierce from earlier, A clumsy metal trap clamped around one of her strong legs fell on her side. Her blue fur and blood mattered, growled in agony as she made a fruitless attempt to release herself, and the cubs huddled close by, creating little agitated noises. Sounds. Poachers, Neri said in a furious whisper. They hunt, fierce for their teeth and golden-tipped fur. Ryan looked about, his thoughts whirling. I might be able to turn off the trap since it appears to be mechanical rather than energy-based. Mother won't let you close her when she's hurt and scared. Perhaps that's why. She let me near her cubs when she was at ease. Trust hasn't entirely vanished. We must try. He met Nair's worried look. She nodded grudgingly, knowing that the poachers would kill her otherwise. Return in the morning to pick up their treasure, if she is not killed by the blood loss first. Then, with nothing else to do, Ryan started to gently make his way toward the clearing. For the time being, keep back in case something goes wrong. Before Nair could object, Ryan came out and made himself known, so one of us should live to assist the cubs. The injured Ferocious saw the yellow-orange head of the predator snap up Bont eyes, focusing on him with a mix of pain-induced fury and recognition. Ryan spoke softly, using the same composed tone he had previously. Hey there, big girl. It looks like you got yourself in a little trouble. The fierce snarled, but it was not as strong as it had been before, blood still leaking from the trap's metal teeth. I know you're scared and hurting, Ryan said, continuing to take his time. But I think I can help if you'll let me. From the steady steps forward. The human's attempt was so reckless that Nair stared from the edge of the clearing. Her heart in her throat was on the verge of suicide, but she couldn't ignore the odd bond she had seen between him and the fierce. Earlier, Ryan stopped as the wounded predator's growls grew louder. I understand, he replied quietly, squatting at a respectful distance. Trust is hard to come by, especially when you're vulnerable. To Nair's surprise, the cubs came over to Ryan after initially identifying him. They walked around him inquisitively, from their previous meeting, even rubbing against his leg like a household pet. That's correct, Ryan answered quietly, as Mother Ferocious observed this exchange, her growls waning a little. I'm the same guy you remember from previously, and I want to help your mum today. Move deliberately slowly as she edged closer to the immobilized leg, the Ferocian tense, but not smart enough to hit her. Eyes seemed to assess his intentions, Ryan clarified. I need to touch the trap, as though the creature could comprehend his. It will hurt, but once he was within arm's reach, you'll be free. Ryan hesitated to allow the trap to focus on his closeness. Then with cautious, he started studying the system, which consisted of simple yet efficient metal teeth powered by AI. It would be necessary to pull the jaws and press 2 release points at once to release the tremendous spring. Ryan called Neri quietly and said, I need your help, Neri. I can't do this alone. Paused just a moment before coming out of the shadows. The predator's fierce gaze followed her every move, yet did not act aggressively. Whether out of agony from blood loss or a comprehension of their motives, she was permitting them to come and instruct me. Neri. The jaws will loosen when I press these 2 points. You'll need to pull them apart, she added, kneeling next to Ryan. Ready right away. Neri put her hands on the blood-stained metal and nodded, saying, On 3, 1, 2, 3. For a horrible minute, Nair pulled with all her effort as Ryan applied intense pressure to the release mechanisms. When the trap suddenly opened with a steel shriek, nothing happened. The fierce beast shouted in agony, but didn't attack rather than removing the device from her injured leg. Ryan said, Back up slowly, and they both backed off. The Ferocious carefully tested her damaged leg as she crawled to her feet to a safer distance. The cut was deep, but had overlooked the main arteries and tendons. She would live, but hunting would be challenging until she. The predator's eyes turned to Ryan and Neri after being healed, her yellow-orange eyes inscrutable. The Ferocian then sank her enormous head in what Nair was still amazed by, could only be explained as an acknowledgement gesture before she gathered her cubs and hobbled into the jungle. "That just happened?" Ryan questioned, his voice a little unsteady from the effects of adrenaline. "It did. Nia's face was surprising to learn that you thought we were deserving of respect. Do you realize that we accomplished a good thing when you fully turned to face him?" She delicately touched his arm tonight, suggesting that everything I've been taught about foreigners may not be accurate, that no human being who has ever experienced a real dawn is like you, Ryan Blackwood. Burst through the bush as Ryan and Neri made their way back to his tent. The events of the previous evening had changed their relationship, from cautious notice of something that might be a friendship or partnership. "The poachers will return for, as they ate a modest breakfast together," Neri remarked. "When they discover their trap ruined and their prey gone, they will be furious." Ryan grimly nodded, asking, "How long have they been in business within your domain?" "My people have lost 5 warriors attempting to drive during 3 moon cycles." Ryan gestured for her to take them away, as her fingers traced one of the dark patterns on her arm, was starting to notice that their weapons, which burn like nothing we have from a distance, were a sign of distress. Prior to energy weapons, Ryan scowled. It was against the law in most civilized nations. "My people stay away from these individuals when hunting because they are not just poachers, but also skilled criminals. We might not be able to combat their burning sticks," Ryan thought. "About this, my training covered strategies for dealing with armed adversaries. If we could locate them and bring them back to their camp, I might be able to. You would put yourself in danger for the sake of helping Nerid study him with fresh regard. I've never been good at looking the other way. But I'm fierce for my people," he grinned. "In addition, I owe that fierce mother who had the opportunity to murder me twice but chose not to, so we shall hunt." Neri, the huntress, stood by her choice. "But first we need to get your clothes ready. Are too obvious in the bush." What transpired next was an intensive lesson in Aurelian concealment tactics, and the information gained, she crushed some plants to make dyes, which she then applied to Ryan's bare skin to match the earthy tones of the outfit. Broke up his outline, making him more difficult to see in the jungle's hazy light. "Your scent is still powerful, Nair," remarking, "This will help you blend visually." She wrinkled her nose a little. "I'll take what I can get, Ryan." In response, assessing his now model appearance, they headed toward the clearing where they discovered the Ryan followed the example of trapped, furious Neridi, who walked with effortless grace, each movement deliberate and silent. By noon, they had arrived at the location where the trap was waiting for them, and he had adjusted his military training to the crowded surroundings, had left it blood-stained and sprung, and she knelt down to examine the surrounding ground with trained eyes, noticing 2 sets of tracks. After we departed, they remained, to observe how these prints overlapped with our own. Ryan nodded, amazed by her ability to track. "In which direction did they move?" Neri pointed farther into the woods. "They must be in that direction because they follow a regular route." For several hours they followed the poachers, becoming more cautious as they noticed more indications of human activity. Abandoned food packaging, often chopped twigs, and even the occasional cigarette, Ryan said in a low voice. "But sloppy. They don't expect anyone to follow them." As dusk drew near, Nair acknowledged that their arrogance would be their undoing. As they approached the edge of another, they noticed the artificial lights ahead crawling forward on their tummies. The poachers' camp was located in a natural hollow. Below them, a group of prefabricated shelters grouped around a central spot, more advanced than Ryan had anticipated. At one end of the camp was a tiny shuttlecraft with a lowered loading ramp, and personnel went between the buildings, carrying equipment and what looked like 7 men, or processed animal parts. Ryan muttered, "Those must be the crates they're loading," and the numbers below. As she observed a man emerge from one of their trophies, Nir's face clouded. Shelter with a bundle of fierce pelts of blue fur with golden tips, Ryan looked at the design of the camp and saw hissed sacred people turned into ornaments for affluent foreigners. Observing the guards' positions and the weapons they were carrying, those are unquestionably military-grade energy rifles. Neri questioned, "Can we stop them?" These men are not merely poachers. They are well armed and well understood. Not in direct confrontation, we're outnumbered and outgunned. Ryan thought as she kept her gaze fixed on the action below. Briefly, but we might be able to sabotage. Their operation make Aurelis too costly for them to continue. They paused, backed off to talk tactics. Ryan's military experience enhanced Ner's understanding of the jungle, leading to a strategy that capitalized on their advantages. Their shuttle is. Ryan clarified that their lifeline is essential to their ability to convey their goods. Planet. They'll be left stranded if we can turn it off without anyone noticing. We may damage their supplies while they try repairs, Neri said, adding that the jungle will become their enemy. They implemented their strategy under the leadership of Ryan as night fell. The poachers had developed a circuitous path that led them to the far side of the camp closest to the shuttle. They only had one guard on duty, and he appeared more interested in his portable entertainment gadget than in Ryan muttered, keeping an eye out for dangers. If something goes wrong, don't try to help me return to your people. Neri took hold of his arm. Whether we confront this threat jointly or not, Ryan nodded oddly, impressed by her loyalty after such a brief acquaintance, and the passion in her gaze dissolved any debate. They slipped toward the shuttle Ryan knew about after waiting for the guard to leave his post. When he promptly found the fuel intake valve, the spacecraft proved handy. "Hand me those plants you collected," he said. She passed him a bundle of fibrous vegetation that she had gathered earlier, and Ryan packed it carefully, substance into the fuel system so that it would be pulled into the engines when they started up, preventing the shuttle from being destroyed. He clarified in a low voice, although in the best-case scenario, these fibers will block the intake filters when they attempt to remove them. Grounded for several days while the system is being cleaned. In the worst scenario, they will try to take off anyhow and harm the engines with. They proceed to their second target, the supply depot here, when the shuttle is sabotaged. Nia's expertise was essential when she used Ryan's program to identify the containers containing preserved food, knives. They slightly pierced the containers so that insects and jungle dampness could reach the contents. A ray of light flashed across the area as they were getting ready to go when a shout came from the direction of the main camp. Clearing, glaring at them and calling out, "Intruders!" in a rough voice. The shuttle. "Run!" Ryan took Nia's hand and dragged her to the edge of the bush as they sank into the darkness as the noises of pursuit approached. An energy bolt sped past them, scorching the grass. Neri took the lead behind them, leading them through the thicket with unwavering accuracy in spite of the close. Ryan followed in the darkness, fully believing her. And the poachers crashed, their strong lights piercing the darkness through the bush behind them, but their lack of experience with. Even though the terrain was slowing them down, their numbers were increasing. Neri growled, letting them disperse in pursuit and yanking Ryan into. They splashed through a little brook in a short gully, the water obscuring their footsteps and scent. But as they ascended, Ryan pushed on as an energy bolt slammed the earth next to them on the far bank, saturating them with superheated soil. Using the utility knife, Neri sliced a thick vine that hung across the ravine as he turned to face their pursuers. The passage was momentarily blocked by the enormous plant that fell. It wouldn't hold them for long, but it bore as they continued to fly. The jungle appeared to enclose them in a protective manner that was familiar to Neri. Yet, we can't outrun them, Ryan said, feeling increasingly confused as his lungs burned from effort and a stitch appeared in his side. "Forever," he exclaimed as they momentarily stopped beneath a huge oak. "We don't need to," Neri answered. "We just need to reach the deep tangle." Before Ryan could inquire what she meant, her respiration was just slightly increased. A fresh sound pierced the night, the distinct roar of a fierce creature that was much closer than was comfortable for Nia's sight. Expanded. "They're already here. We need to move quickly." They started flying again, and the cries of several angry poachers now blended with the sounds of pursuit, taking on a tone of fear when they became aware that they were being pursued from a different angle. The jungle abruptly parted to reveal a little space that was dominated by The trunk of a huge, twisted oak was easily 20 feet in circumference, and its roots that grew like walls above the ground. And Neri went straight for it, dragging Ryan into a space between two massive roots. "Stay." The noises of mayhem erupted in the jungle behind them as she murmured, leaning close to him in the cramped area. Energy weapons firing, men yelling, and the ominous roars of beasts on. The hunt's cries pierced the night and were suddenly cut off. "What's going on?" Ryan muttered. "The ferocious guard." "The poachers have entered the deep tangle in the heart of ferocious hunting," Neri simply said. "To their territory. Grounds." "You guided them into an ambush," Ryan acknowledged with a renewed sense of deference. "I led them to justice," Neri clarified, softening his tone. The bush passed their own verdict, and they stayed concealed as the noises of fighting slowly subsided, leaving only the typical jungle nocturnal song. Ryan trailed closely behind Neri as they cautiously emerged from their hiding spot, and the jungle appeared to be unaltered and serene, even failing to mention the violence that had taken place in the area. But both were aware that the poachers had encountered the "we should return to your camp," Neri remarked gently, "since we were Aurelius's guardians and had not won." As they returned through the bush after nightfall, a fresh insight came to them about staying in the deep tangle. They had overcome adversity together and gained trust after initially being hesitant in the crucible of common purpose. And by the time they arrived to Ryan's tent close to dawn, they were both exhausted. Slumped next to the rekindled fire, the adrenaline from the events of the night finally wearing off, Ryan remarked as he started to nod off, "They ought to be aware of what you did to keep them safe tonight, and how we shared our victory." Neri responded, drawing nearer to him for warmth as would be the case, her silver-white hair shining in the firelight. Describing it, Ryan felt Nir's hand touch his as consciousness waned. Something significant had shifted between the fingers, entwining in a gesture that transcended their disparate origins. The bush murmured secrets around them, something neither of them had expected, but both of them suddenly accepted. 3 weeks had gone by since the night in the dense tangle of the poachers, and the impossibilities continued on the pre-dawn wind. Due to Ryan's sabotage, the camp was abandoned, their shuttle was stranded, and there were not enough survivors to make any repairs, had proliferated throughout the Aurelian tribes of the stranger who had gained respect for his assistance in defeating the hunters. With Nir's help, the ferocious Ryan's camp has transformed into something more permanent. Under his direction, he had built an Aurelian-style shelter, a platform tucked away among the lower branches of a huge tree with broad leaves for a roof and walls of braided vines. It was unexpectedly at night. Their partnership is safe and cozy from the many predators that prowl the jungle floor had changed as well. What started off as a cautious partnership had developed into something more profound, and they spent their days together exploring the jungle, with Nerid teaching Ryan how to be a realist. He told tales of Earth and other planets he had been to, where they spent their evenings in ever closer quarters, talking by the fire and discovering each other's past, aspirations and anxieties. They watched the sunrise color the jungle as they sat together on the edge of Ryan's platform on this particular morning. The head of the canopy, which was in amber and gold hues, was pleasantly perched on his shoulder. "My people wish to meet you," she blurted abruptly, upsetting their comfortable silence as her silver-white hair fell down his arm. "The Council of Elders has called for your presence," Ryan said in a strained tone. "I thought your people avoided outsiders." "They do, but you are no exception." She turned to face him, her orange skin shimmering in the morning light, saying, "No longer just an outsider." She paused for a rare moment before saying, "You are the human who speaks to Ferocious, the one who helped defeat the hunters." The simple statement, "You are important to me," warmed him more than the anxiety on her face. "Rising sun, after which I'll meet them at the next village, which is half a day away today." They swiftly got ready for the trip from here, with Ryan, donning his fighting uniform out of consideration for the formality of the on this particular occasion. Near had added ornamental feathers and metal plating that had been polished to a dull luster. As they journeyed, Ryan observed a shift in the Aurelian culture's use of beads that represented respect and peaceful intents. Around them, the deep forests, untamed, wild nature eventually gave way to faint indications of cultivation of specific fruit-bearing plants in clusters along paths that are almost perceptible to the untrained eye, but exist. However, Neri clarified that we are entering the outer gardens, meaning that my people mold the jungle rather than eradicate it. Urge it to deliver everything we require by noon when they arrive in the village. Although the word village didn't seem to describe what Ryan saw, the Orlean community was completely constructed inside, and it appeared as though the jungle itself had been built around the enormous trees, with platforms and bridges linking various levels. Convinced to build homes and meeting spots instead of being demolished to make room for them when they arrived, created a sudden commotion when orange-skinned individuals emerged on platforms and bridges. Observing with unidentified Asner guided Ryan toward the settlement's center. Children who were braver than their elders darted near, analyzed the unfamiliar guest before taking cover in the center of the settlement, where the biggest tree Ryan had. Have you ever seen a giant that dwarfed even the enormous deep jungle specimens? Nay guided him to the area where its trunk had been partially hollowed out, creating a natural chamber. "Council is waiting," she stated gently, "so keep in mind to be truthful and respectful." Elderly Aurelians sat in a semicircle inside the tree, elevating truth above all else. Platforms. Their silver-white hair had turned grey, and their orange complexion had somewhat faded with age. But their eyes stayed vigilant in assessing a masculine figure seated in the center, whose ornate staff and intricate markings suggested Chief Thorin. Neri replied with a deep bow, "This is Ryan Blackwood, of Earth, friend of the Ferocious, and Lieutenant Commander of the United Earth Fleet." Ryan took her lead. "I am honored to be invited into your home, and I bow respectfully," the chief calmly observed him. "For many stories about you as a human have reached us for a long time before you spoke. Some claim that you have power that soothes the big hunts, while others claim that you speak to Furious. You challenge our long-held views with fresh perspectives." "I don't have any magic," Ryan said plainly. "A desire to comprehend rather than conquer, as well as respect for all life things." "Humans have visited Auralis," one of the female elders said. "But you come from a people known for conquest. Prior to collecting samples from our plants and animals, they discussed development and resources." Ryan stated that not all humans share the same values, with some aiming to, yes, exploit, but people like me only want to learn and find common ground with people who are not like us. "And what have you learned from our Neri?" the chief inquired with a knowing gleam in his eyes. Ryan looked at Neri, who was standing boldly next to him. "I've discovered that genuine harmony doesn't come from dominating nature, but after assimilating, I've discovered that patience and observation are the sources of strength instead of force, and I've discovered that unexpected locations can yield insight." Even in a predator's eyes, the council heard a murmur of acceptance. The chief nodded slowly and articulately. Yet even the best of intentions are put to the test by events. "What are your current plans?" A human who talks fiercely asks, "When your ship comes for you, will you return to your people?" The horizon would ultimately serve as Ryan's emergency beacon in the center of the uncertainty that had been developing inside of him. Continued to send the weekly, but the idea of leaving Aurelius it had grown more agonizing to think about Neri. Before he could come up with a young Aurelian warrior's attitude changed to one of urgency as a ruckus broke out outside the council room. The tranquil trees were sliced through by flaming metal birds that swooped down from the sky. The elders' features were somber with anxiety when the atmosphere was abruptly disrupted. "How many?" the chief questioned. The warrior retorted that the hunter's shuttle had the same marks as 3 large vessels and numerous smaller ones. When Ryan's blood became cold, the poachers must have called for assistance. Before we destroyed their camp, there was an important discussion in the council room, and Ryan turned to Nair, whose he continued, "Your people aren't equipped to fight this kind of threat," his expression hardening into resolute resolve. "Those spacecraft will be equipped with energy weapons, perhaps even atmospheric bombers, and then we will use the jungle," softly said. "As usual," she responded, "this is different. These aren't just poachers." Ryan turned to the chief, saying, "Chief Thorn, with this organized force, with your consent, I might potentially assist with my emergency beacon by changing it to send." The chief looked at him carefully. "A distress signal that the United Earth Fleet will recognize as a priority alert. I would bring protectors," Ryan explained, "and you would bring more foreigners to our globe. Severe regulations about native populations. They would deal with the poachers rather than your people in a tense quiet." Fell across the room as the chief thought about it. At last, he agreed, saying, "Do whatever you have to do to keep Arels safe." Alongside you, they hurried back toward Ryan's camp, avoiding the deep jungle by following detours that only Nair knew how to. Overhead, the sound of engines intensified as the poacher ships looked for a landing area before heading to their former A's. They rushed, Ryan thought. That gives us a little time. When they arrived at his shelter, Ryan set up camp right away to work on the emergency beacon with parts he retrieved from his crash pod and his utility knife. The power output and transmission frequency, which will totally deplete the power cell, or he clarified while working, it should reach the horizon if they are anywhere in this system, but if there is only one burst signal, it is dead. "We struggle with what we have," after Ryan silently asked. "They're not nary." As the power cell ran out, the modified beacon pulsed once, displaying a brilliant burst of energy that swiftly subsided. Communication had arrived, but it was still unclear what Nerid had asked. "The poachers will target them," Ryan added, warning the woman at her shocked reaction. "First of all, they are the planet's most important resource. If we can warn them of the danger, they may retreat farther, till assistance arrives, into the jungle." "No one warns the Ferocians," Neri remarked, "but they are the ones who warn others. There's a first time for everything." Her tone was more one of awe than protest. "Can you guide us to the deep tangle?" Ryan collected what supplies he could carry. She nodded, her face displaying a mix of fear and resolve. "But we have to move quickly since the metal birds are getting closer." Started right away, heading deeper into the woods as the sounds of the poaching vessels faded into the distance. In the daytime, the tangle was much more intimidating, a thick knot of enormous trees and undergrowth that appeared Taurusist invaders. As they made their way across the more difficult terrain, Ryan inquired, "How do we find the ferocious?" "They locate us," Neri said, as if calling us in with a deep growl. A huge figure appeared from the foliage in front of them, and they had saved the woman who was hurt. She looked at them with those perceptive yellow-orange eyes, her leg now healed, but with a noticeable scar. Her posture showed recognition, and Ryan took a step forward, opening his hands slowly, sides. "We come with warning," he murmured, hoping his tone would convey even though he knew the creature couldn't understand. Furious turned her head in alarm as danger approaches from the sky, watching him. And then, to their astonishment, she turned and started to go, stopping to give them a quick glance. Neri said, "She wants us to follow," with astonishment in her voice. They pursued the fierce farther into the maze, eventually arriving at a remote valley obscured by overhanging vegetation. Here, dozens of fierce animals gathered in familial groupings. Their guide took them to the heart of the crowd, where they sat in a location Ryan never would have thought possible. Observing them impatiently from her hunches, more fierce creatures carefully approached. Neri remarked in a scarcely audible voice, "Now what?" inquiring about the weird people their fellow had brought. Close to Ryan's side, We tried something wild. Ryan knelt down slowly. Using his finger to scoop a handful of dirt, he sketched a rough illustration of the poacher ships in the mud. Then, he drew lines from the ships to figures while imitating the sound of gunfire. Symbolizing the fierce animals that had collected, some of them approached to watch him with obvious interest. Drawings. The woman they had saved gazed at the rough diagram. Then, I believe, looked up into the sky and back at the drawing. She comprehends Neri's whisper, and the fierce woman flung back her head as though to validate her assessment. Out a howl that was unlike anything they had ever heard. Not a territorial warning or a hunting call, but something more. Within minutes, the complex and other fierce joined the cacophony that was echoing throughout the valley. Scatter a family group that was traveling farther into the bush with intelligence-like purpose and organization. Ryan came to the realization that they were far more than what most people would consider predator species. Realized that the fierce woman was still observing them carefully, then made a move. She pushed one of her pups at them, leaving both people stunned. The young, fierce creature approached warily, holding a little glittering object in its mouth that had fallen at Ryan's feet before it withdrew. He gently picked up the offering, which was a flawless crystal that pulsed with a different kind of mineral than any he had seen on Aurelus. Neri breathed a heartstone, a subtle inner glow that seemed to react to his touch. Her eyes are wide, they are extremely uncommon, and only form in the darkest regions of the. They are supposed to link the life power of everyone who touches them before Ryan, even in the jungle where no Aurelian has ever gone. Might react when the distant sound of engines broke into the tranquil valley. The fierce female snarled and looked, Ryan remarked, carefully pocketing the crystal. "We need to go," before turning back toward the noises. "Thank you," he murmured. Furthermore, she bowed profoundly to the fierce predator, who observed them for a minute longer before consuming her remaining Ryan, and Neri headed back toward the Aurelian settlement in the hopes of warning the cubs before vanishing into the jungle of the impending danger. But as they got closer to the deep tangle's edge, the sky above them abruptly filled with not the smaller poaching vessel's boom of engines, but the characteristic sound of fleet shuttlecraft. "The horizon," Ryan said with a wave of relief. They understood my message. Came out of the edge of the bush, just in time to witness 3 fleet shuttles battling the poachers' ships. The streamlined military craft effortlessly outwitted their adversaries, precisely turning down engines and weapon systems. Your A's, they watched the lopsided combat. Nari noted that people are formidable warriors, adding that they're just doing their job. In response, Ryan said, "Protecting those who can't protect themselves." The conflict broke out an hour later, was over. The fleet security officers had grounded or apprehended the poachers' vessels and detained their crews. With the horizon symbol shining on its hull, the shuttle arrived close to Ryan's location. Captain Elena Reyes herself came out of the craft, her face changing from one of professional worry to one of relief upon seeing Ryan. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwood," she yelled as she strode over to him. "We were terrified when your pod vanished. Thank you for answering my question, Captain." Ryan smiled and said, "It takes more than a crash landing to keep me down. Distress call. We were already looking for you in the system." Her eyes moved to Neri, who showed signs of inquiry. "Sentiment, I notice you've made friends while you've been here, Captain Reyes." Ryan introduced the Aurelian people, who are the world's guardians, with proper respect. "This is my Captain Elena Reyes, the United Earth Fleet's Neri commanding officer, took the initiative and adopted the Your Warrior Flies with honor," she remarked, adopting the official welcome stance of her people. Aurelius now considers him a buddy. The captain grinned, obviously delighted by Ner's proficiency in the trade dialect. "I'm happy to hear that Lieutenant Commander Blackwood can be diplomatic in improbable circumstances," Captain Ryan stated. "The poachers you've apprehended are a part of a larger group that has been hunting protected," he said in a serious tone. "Species and endangering the native population. As we learned from their correspondence," Reyes said, remain calm, guaranteed that they will be held accountable under fleet law and that this planet would be immediately placed under protection. Swept over Ryan, but it was subdued by a fresh worry that had been developing ever since he heard the fleet. What would happen to his friendship with Nero now that help had come? Shuttles with Alice, perhaps sensing his. The Horizon will stay in orbit for a few days while we finish our investigation, Captain Reyes continued. Commander, you don't have to leave right away. Take your time to wrap up your business here. Her knowing look between. Thank you, Captain, Ryan said, adding that she and Neri made it apparent that she understood more than just what she was saying. Thank you. The captain promised to transfer supplies and communication equipment to Ryan's spacecraft when she returned. Posture. He turned to face Ner, who had a complicated expression of relief. She stated, At the poacher's defeat, but unsure of what would come next, you will leave with your people. Ryan stretched for her hand and intertwined his fingers with hers, without asking a question. Hope sparked in her eyes, but she didn't have to stay if there was a cause to. Reason would be powerful enough to abandon your reality. So Ryan pulled the crystal out of his mouth rather than responding verbally. You mentioned that the fierce cub had given them something that pulsed between them, its light intensifying as they both touched it. He murmured softly, binds the life force of those who touch it. Perhaps that's not a coincidence. Perhaps it's an indication of what, though her gaze gave the impression that she already knew the answer, that certain ties cut beyond worlds. Neri muttered. He moved closer, carefully tracing one of the marks, on her cheek with his free hand. I could ask for the fleet will desire a relationship with the native population now that this planet is under permanent assignment to Alice. Protection. Who could be better than someone you've already built trust with, Ryan said. Leave your life among the stars. They will still be there, smiling. But what we discovered here, what we've created together, is more uncommon than I accepted your request after seeing how radiant any Hearthstone Nair's response smile was. Person who hesitated and spoke to ferocious as a liaison to your people. Suddenly timid, and the gem between their clasped hands as my chosen match-pulsed brighter, as though to seal their proclamation, and the sky became darker over them. In the days that followed Ryan's birth, the first stars appeared in the evening, along with the orbiting Horizon's lights. Unexpectedly, Speed Captain Ray granted the request for a permanent assignment to Aurelius, as it appeared that a tiny station was set up at the outskirts of Aurelian because they had already started the paperwork and expected his decision. Region, with a small crew that has received training in non-interference procedures and cultural sensitivity. The Council established a formal alliance with the United Earth Fleet under the leadership of Chief Thorin. Ryan was the main person responsible for protecting the Aurelians and the Ferocians from further exploitation. His special relationship with both species as an intermediary makes him indispensable to the diplomatic process. And at the core of it all was Ryan and Neri's romance, which had started with under careful study and developed into something neither had anticipated. Conceivable that their relationship, which was honored in both human and Aurelian customs, became a symbol of the possibility of world-to-world harmony. 6 months after his crash landing, as the sunset painted the forest in shades that were familiar to him, Ryan stood on the platform of their joint house. Gold and amber Neri joined him, and her body is now displaying the first faint indications of the child of two worlds created in love and hope that is developing inside of her. Any regrets? She inquired, bending in his embrace. Ryan grinned as he considered the improbable series of events that had led him to this point. A crashed pod, an inquisitive bystander, and the surprising endorsement of a top predator, not one. This is exactly where I'm meant to be, he said, drawing her closer as the first stars emerged in the fading sky. Be in the bush beneath a fierce scream that reverberated through the dusk, not at the female they had rescued, now frequently used, what Ryan had learned to recognize as a greeting, a warning or a hunting call. Visitor to the borders of their domain. recognizing the peculiar alliance that had altered Aurelius's destiny. Two worlds that were once distinct, now bonded by a shared idea of love and respect, and it had all started with a single moment of confidence between improbable allies.